All right. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Good evening.
How's everybody doing? I see we're all back from the feast. I had a great feast. I know I talked to everybody out there, and they all had a great feast.
Great feast.
I just had to rest after the feast. Usually I get good rest, but I was wore out. I was plumb wore out, but hey, I had a great time. The viewers may notice we have a new member on tonight. Doug McKinney's on with us. Say hi, Doug.
Hi, Doug.
Can you hear us, Doug?
Greetings, everyone.
There we go. There we go. Tonight's program, we're going to discuss Halloween, and James is having video issues. It was suggested we could put a pumpkin up there, but we're not going to do that. We're just going to hope his video comes in here in a minute. If not, we can hear him just fine. So why don't you take us out tonight?
You know, not seeing me on Halloween may be a blessing to some of the out there. I'm going to scare them with my bald head. This is called Search for a Pastor During Bible Times. This is a weird joke, but different. The man on the podium says, we do not have a happy report as we've been unable to find a suitable candidate for pastor of our church thus far. We do have one promising prospect, only one. Adam was a good man, but problems with his wife. Noah was a former pastorate for 120 years, but no converts. Joseph, a big thinker, but he was too much of a dreamer, had a prison record. David, the most promising candidate of all, until we discovered he had an affair. Solomon, a great preacher, but he had some serious women problems. Jonah told us he was swallowed by a huge fish. He said the fish later spit him out on the shore near here. We hung up immediately. John says he's a Baptist, but doesn't dress like one. Sleeps in the outdoors, has a weird diet, and provokes denominational leaders. Paul, powerful CEO type, fascinating preacher, fascinating, but he's short on tact, unforgiving with young assistants, harsh, and has been known to preach all night. Timothy, too young. But we do have one good prospect. His references are solid. He's a steady plotter, conservative, good connections, knows how to handle money. He's good with money. We're inviting him. His name is Judas.
What was that name?
Yeah.
Now, I thought I would supplement that joke with, this is something different. I call these, maybe it's good you don't see them, T-shirt jokes. This first one shows a squirrel's face. He's sticking his nose in your face with his paws crossed. And the squirrel says in big letters, "Excuse me, your bird feeder is empty." Our squirrels around here literally act that way too. And a couple other T-shirt ones. This is a big white T-shirt. I go the extra mile, usually because I'm lost. A couple more. I had to break up with math. Too many problems.
You're using them all up tonight.
And here's one that'll really get you all in trouble. Retired and down to one boss. My wife. Well, you can't see my stupid grin, so.
Oh. So we're gonna talk about Halloween tonight, and we've got several aspects that we're going to approach it from. I believe kind of origins we've covered in the past, but there may be some new material there, and then also what the Catholic Church, what they believe about it, and how they have adapted it, how they do that a lot. So, where do you want to start?
Why don't we start with what God says in the Bible about that kind of thing? I want to read two scriptures, and then we can discuss them a little bit. The first one is Deuteronomy 12. There are a few other places in the Bible as well, but we'll stick with Deuteronomy. It's a good second telling of all the stuff that the Israelites did and what God told them. Deuteronomy 12, verse 30. God says through Moses to the Israelites, he says, "Take heed to yourself that you be not snared like with a hook by following them," meaning that the Canaanites, that God is having them sweep out of the land, after they be destroyed from before you, that you inquire not after their gods, saying, "How did these people, nations, serve their gods? Even so will I do likewise." And then he says, how they put their children, burn their children in the fire. God says that he hated their religious methods, and that they would be like a hook or a snare to the Israelites. And I thought about that for a minute, and one thing does seem obvious to me before we go to the next scripture is that a lot of times when you look at paganism, you first think of the cute things, the attractive things, the fun things, and you don't see the hook, the negative things that really make paganism in the raw really bad. And I think people just overlook that. And God had good reasons for getting rid of those individuals. Then before we discuss it more, I want to go to 18, Deuteronomy 18, and verse 9 to 12. Because I think this is what most people don't know, because they really don't know that the Old Testament is valid in so many ways. Forbidden pagan practices. Deuteronomy 18, verse 9. When you're coming to the land which the Eternal your God gives you, you shall not learn to do after the abominations of those nations. God calls them their religious practices, abominations. There shall not be found among you anyone that makes his son or daughter pass through the fire. That means you burn your children, little babies, you burn them alive to appease some idol, and generally the idol is going to give you a good harvest and safety from your enemies. And they found many little skulls and pagan idols all over the world. And by the way, I was just thinking of a modern version of it. It's not exactly the same, but it's not totally similar. Why do people abort innocent little babies? Even some that are born alive, they kill anyway. They do it because they're financially inconvenient. Isn't that somewhat some of the pagans who kill babies so that they superstitiously believe they'll have more prosperity?
Yes.
They do it for profit.
It also seems to me that the aborted child is usually the first child. And it's interesting that a lot of times when they did these children sacrifices, it would have been a firstborn.
Firstborns are special to God.
Right, and Satan doesn't change. He is who he is, and he abhors that firstborn child. People that are they don't realize that they are absolutely demonic and devil worship when they do that.
And now I know people do it for many reasons, some embarrassment, but 50 million babies in the last 40 years, that is unbelievable when you think about it. Unbelievable. 50 million babies. Well, anyway, let me. That's the devil trying to stop me from talking. He says, scaring you is bad enough, but we're going to get you quiet. Okay. When you finish reading it, pass you the fire, or use divinations, or observers of times, enchanters, or a witch, or a charmer, or a consulter with familiar spirits. I was looking up some commentaries. There are several categories of those, but normally familiar spirits often represent consulting with the dead. Isn't Halloween the night of consulting with the or appeasing the dead?
For the most part, yeah. There's a you could look at when looking into the Halloween origins. It's just a mess of stuff, but I mean, it's all centered around death.
Yeah, or a wizard or a necromancer. For all that they do, these things are an abomination unto the eternal. Because these abominations, the eternal your God will drive them out of the promised land. So even though they look like good things, God is totally upset with them, and it's just that we don't realize how bad they are. Let me just read one little thing. I got this. There's some books on it. Then we can move on to the next aspect. It says the Canaanite gods, little g gods, and there's a whole bunch of them. I have some of their names, but most of you are familiar with some of the names like Baal and Belial and others. And gods and goddesses. It says there's no indication that the Canaanite gods handed down any moral code for their people to follow. Indeed, the Canaanites were apparently much more moral than their gods, an observation that is not especially flattering to the gods, because the Canaanites were not that moral. They were supposed to gain fertility and prosperity through their gods and goddesses, and one of the main things they had were temple prostitution.
Yep.
It was prevalent, and they said, their gods had no moral standards. And by the way, temple prostitution, we might think of it as just a mature lady who decides she wants to make her money in the temple as a temple prostitute. Nope. They generally started as young girls that were sold to the temple or given to the temple as young girls, and as prostitutes they had young boys, young girls, men and women. You could take your choice. And you could imagine how pedophiles would love a religion like that, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
You know, Muhammad's favorite wife was Aisha. He married her when she was 6 years old, and she was also his granddaughter.
Ooh.
I had dinner with I don't want to say, a fellow that would know, and he told me that the average IQ in, I believe he said Afghanistan, is below 70 or below due to inbreeding.
Ooh.
Wow.
And is that the country where they shot the girl in the head because she wanted to go to school, or was that the neighboring country of?
Yeah. She survived.
Not Pakistan's a neighboring country, but she was in one of those two countries, and they shot her in the head, the Taliban, because girls weren't supposed to go to school.
Right. I don't know which country it was.
One of those two.
One of those two, yes.
Anyway, I guess we're getting off the subject, but there's a lot of weird things go on, and temple prostitution was a big part of the Canaanite religion. And the thing is, let me see. I've got other. This guy says their religion was almost pornographic. They had all kinds of statues with upright obelisk, and I won't say any more, but you get the general idea.
James, it's prevalent actually in a whole. It's prevalent in throughout the religions of the world anyway.
Let me come in here. Let me see if I can get us back on track. I want to talk about the the pagan traditions, Halloween absolutely originated in paganism, and so it shouldn't surprise anybody that its customs are related to all these pagan beliefs. I have a chapter here, or a paragraph here from the Encyclopedia Britannica. It says that in ancient Britain and Ireland, the Celtic festival of Samhain, that's spelled Samhain, but it's pronounced Samhain, that was observed on October 31st at the end of the summer. Supposedly, the souls of the dead were supposed to revisit their homes on this day, and the autumnal festival acquired a kind of a sinister significance. It had featured ghosts and witches and goblins, black cats and fairies and demons and all kinds of things like that. Were supposed to be out and about and roaming here and there. And it was the time to placate the supernatural powers that they believed were controlling the processes in nature. Halloween was thought to be the most favorable time also for divinations concerning marriage and luck and health and death. And it was the only day, get this, it was the only day on which the help of the actual devil was invoked for such purposes.
Wow.
Of course, Halloween symbols and customs and practices, today they have a great influence upon Western culture, and they always have, but it seems to be growing more. But in the early American history, Halloween was not celebrated. It was not allowed to be celebrated due to America's very strong Christian heritage at that time that our forefathers practiced. It was not really widely observed until we got to the early 20th century. And initially, it was practiced by the Irish. There was a small Irish Catholic settlements practiced it until the point where a great deal of the Irish started to migrate here because they were having the great potato famine, and they brought a lot of those customs with them. So to some degree, this modern Halloween that we see today is an Irish holiday with early origins in the Celtic Winter Festival. In American culture, the rise in the popularity of Halloween coincides roughly with the national rise in Spiritism. That began around 1848. Of course, Spiritism is basically a doctrine of human interaction and communication with spirits. So Ireland is the only place in the world where Halloween is actually a national holiday. It's celebrated with fireworks, and children even get out of school for a week.
A week?
Yeah, they take a week off. They get out of school. Among the modern customs and practices of Halloween, you can note some numerous and probable and possible influences. The pagan roots include the costumes and the candy begging and the jack-o'-lanterns. And once again, in old Ireland especially, people thought that ghosts and spirits roamed after dark on Halloween. They lit candles or lanterns to keep the spirits away. And if they had to go outside, they wore costumes and masks to frighten the spirits to keep them from being recognized by these early beings. Halloween masks and costumes were also used to hide one's attendance at pagan festivals. They wanted to go to these festivals and party it up, but they didn't want anyone to recognize them. Another thing is the pumpkin seems to come from a tradition of witchery where they used to take human skulls and put a candle inside the skull to light the entrance to where they were going to have the witch's coven at.
Ooh.
Now, the Druidic tradition of bonfires are said to be symbolic of the Catholic concept of purgatory. That seems to be the origination of that. There's a school of thought out there that's interesting to me, and that is that Halloween is somehow supposed to be an evil reflection of the Day of Atonement. Now, we've all noticed that conventional holidays are like Christmas and Easter are actually a counterfeit of a holy day. But I don't have any substantiation for that. That is something that I heard, and it was very interesting to me. But anyway, in God's church, our people, real Christians, we do not celebrate death. We celebrate life. And that's why we have absolutely nothing to do with this pagan holiday.
One thing that might fit into what you just said, Gary Johnson, is that of the two goats that atonement represents, one goat represents, of course, the death of Christ, the Messiah. The other goat represents Satan, and he's taken out in the middle of the desert, or like kind of comparable to being lost in the the bottomless pit. But the devil at least is part of it, and I know the King James calls him a scapegoat, but it's just how the word is meant. But the sins of the people are confessed over that goat, Satan. So in a sense, the Day of Atonement represents Satan getting his just dues. Is Halloween representing Satan showing out? I mean, the
I
way
don't
the
know.
world does.
A lot of the symbolism around Satanism is goat.
I think there probably is
And
some connection there. The fact is that Satan counterfeits our holy days, and maybe true there, but I'd have to research that further to see if I could find the actual connections.
But one thing I find interesting is that in the early American, colonial days, and well, probably up until after the Civil War, from what I've read, Christmas and Halloween were forbidden in many places in America. But after the Civil War, when more Irish came and other things happened, I read that the department stores gained more power, even though some of them were owned by Jewish people, by the way, and they found Christmas the #1 moneymaker. And guess who's #2 moneymaker?
Halloween.
Isn't that unbelievable? More than 4th of July. Halloween is the #2 money, and it's getting bigger every year.
Yeah.
Well, judging
stores pop up out of nowhere for about 3 or 4 weeks, and that's all they do. That's their livelihood.
Judging from the store that I work in, I would have thought that Easter might have been the biggest one, but I'd have to say that, lately here, my take would be that Halloween probably was running neck and neck with Easter, or maybe it has surpassed it.
Yeah, it has. It's #2 in the nation.
Well,
there's a lot of junk going on.
If you're paying attention online, you're seeing the rise of demonism worldwide. With the cameras and all the things that are out there, it's like every day something will pop up online. Where inside a church a couple of weeks ago, there was a chair that would just move itself around in the middle of the night. They had cameras in a church. And so you're seeing demonism popping up more and more and more. A lot of people want to practice Wicca, which is all part of this as well.
Yeah.
And worshiping Mother Earth and all of that kind of thing. It's interesting. The word Wicca means wise one, and the root word is witch. So you're going to see more and more demonism, and the more the country pulls away from God, you're going to see less and less protection.
Well, they're being embraced by the local churches. The local churches here in this town where I live are throwing Halloween parties.
Oh, they've been doing that for about a decade or so now. 15 years, 20 years.
The kids off the streets.
Yep. They basically succumbed to the same thing that the Catholic Church did by bringing in paganism and trying to twist it or turn it into something of Christianity.
Well, one of the Catholic churches in my area, when they have their Halloween party to get the kids off the streets, they order several kegs of beer and a case of liquor.
Really?
Yeah.
So the parents will bring the kids, huh? I guess that's why the parents will bring the kids. I was just
when you study all the depths.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, when you study into the depths of the original creation and how all of these customs each were observed, you can go back to the Druids. You were talking about Ireland a while ago. I'm having a little bit of echo in my speakers, and I'm not getting everything y'all are saying toward the end of the sentences. But each custom has its own little nuance as far as concerning the Druids. The trick-or-treat itself, of course, if you studied, goes back to where the Druids would visit the local farms and villages, and they would demand a young maiden as payment, or if they couldn't get that, they would steal animals. And the trick-or-treat of that was you either gave them what they asked, or they would take the blood of one of your animals that you killed and mark your doorposts and come back at some later point and would take the life of anyone that they chose. And that's kind of how the trick-or-treat thing plays. And I don't understand how this world can look at those kind of customs, and even though they don't do that same thing now, how can you look at that custom and want your children to be a part of that? And then when you move into some of the other little silly things, like bobbing for apples, when you can imagine the Druids traveling around and taking people from this village and that farmhouse and the other, and they would build something similar to the Trojan horse was what I was trying to think of, and except this thing would be in the shape of a excuse me, a god with two legs, a torso, and a head. And inside these legs, which this thing would be as much as 40 feet tall or so, they would build little cages inside these legs and in the torso and store these prisoners. Well, then through the night, as they added more prisoners and as they got into their rituals, the big cauldron that they used to bear, they had a special brew, similar to home brew or whatever, and it would have apples and whatnot. But part of the punishment of the people that were captured they would be given the option of either stand beside the cauldron and be beheaded, like some cultures that we know are doing today, or they could take the option of bobbing for apples in the boiling cauldron. I mean, that's not much of a choice. And there comes, the custom of bobbing for apples and things like that. Though each one of these little customs that come about that are part of the Halloween ritual, every one of these things tie back in to the Druids doing these type things, except of course in a gross manner. But still, you have the thing. It's what it represents. And I've always been taught, it doesn't matter if you're marching in the parade or if you're watching the parade go by and doing nothing, you're still part of the parade.
Right. I've heard the same thing about the boiling cauldrons. I've heard that probably, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. I heard a program on radio. They discussed the same thing. There's a lot of that and a lot of other things that tie into this as far as Gary and the skulls and the candles. There's traditions that go back as far as gourds and fat from humans, and it's normally babies that are sacrificed during Halloween. They put it. The world has twisted it into a cutesy thing nowadays, but it doesn't make any difference. It's still an abomination in God's eyes, no matter how much cute you tie to it.
That's right.
And the world just they have no clue.
And when you tell them, they go, "But that's not why I do it."
Exactly. That about Christmas, Easter, and how everything they want to do, they've got an excuse. But they don't know. Are you still with us, James?
Yeah, I'm still here. I was just thinking about if your religion is a bad moral influence on you, but also did violent things to children and others that they sacrificed to.
We can take it back, Ken, to one of the older booklets.
Doug, I think you have a lag on your end. Are you there? Doug, can you hear me?
Uh-oh.
I think we lost
Yes.
him. But go ahead.
Well, I would just go ahead and say there was a shooting in Washington up somewhere, and a bunch of kids got shot. I don't know if any of them have died yet. They're in critical condition in hospitals.
Washington State.
Washington State. I thought that's where it was. And I've got this article about Halloween, and it says that one of the two most popular shows on TV is The Walking Dead, and I forgot the other name. I got this American Horror Story. Both are Halloween oriented, and zombies are big Halloween costumes, and there are a lot of video games that are more and more violent, and they even promoted one of the games is the blood is more realistic than it used to be. Something occurred to me. Could we be getting the combination of more violence, more serious, because they had plenty of guns 50 years ago, and probably 80 years ago, almost every family had a rifle or a shotgun on the mantle, including when I was growing up. We had a shotgun right out there. Daddy had it out there. So it's not the availability of guns is actually there are more guns now than there are less guns now than there used to be as far as availability. The difference in society seems to be both the social fabric, like Halloween, pushes blood and gore and violence, and many of the TV shows and video games push gore and violence. When you combine that with people who are sick or emotionally unstable, as families get all screwed up more and more, that's a toxic mix that's, I think, starting to affect the country more and more.
Yeah, there's another.
Absolutely.
I don't know if it's a movie or TV series called Ouija coming out. It's going to open our kids to that. That's
movie,
kind of.
I think. Yeah, it's a movie. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of our kids have moved away from that. That's an old-timey thing, but now they're bringing it back and introducing it to our kids again.
Yep, you're right. It's the whole culture is going the way of zombies and death, and everything evil and messed up is popular. It's cool nowadays. Did you want me to talk about how the Catholic Church has adopted what's this, All Saints Day, and kind of put
Yes, if you can, yes, I think it's helpful.
I got this from the CatholicCulture.org site. I want to find this is from a Catholic site. It says the Solemnity of All Saints is celebrated on November 1st. It is a holy day of obligation, and it is the day that the Church honors all of God's saints, even those who have not been canonized by the Church. It goes on to say it is a family day of celebration. This is November 1st, All Saints Day. We celebrate the memory of our family members. And in parentheses here, it's kind of interesting. It says, members of the mystical body, the communion of saints. So they're the memory of family members, of their family members. They consider that members of the mystical body, the communion of saints. I'll come back to that in a second. It says that this is not eternal happiness in the presence of God. We rejoice that they have reached their eternal goal and ask their prayers on our behalf so that we too may join them in heaven and praise God through all eternity. And let's see, it goes on here to say that honoring of all Christian martyrs of the faith was originally celebrated on May 13th. So November 1st, All Saints Day, was originally May 13th. The date was established by the 4th century Pope Boniface IV in 615. It's a Feast of All Martyrs is what it was called then. Let's see. Christian dedication, okay. In 844, so a couple hundred or 250 years later or so, 40 years later, Pope Gregory IV transferred the feast to November 1st. And it is believed that it was done to substitute a feast for the pagan celebrations during that time of year. So, same thing they did with Christmas, or with the solar, help me out here. Saturnalia, and they converted that to Christmas. They converted Halloween to All Saints Day, or the day after. So they have this, this track record of doing that consistently, and this is what they've done here. But I looked at that, members of the mystical body. I had no idea what they were talking about. I looked it up, and what they say the members of the mystery is an analogy born of by any society of men to an organization is sufficiently manifest. In every society, the constituent individuals are united, as are also members of a body, to effect a common end, while the parts they severely play correspond to the functions of the bodily organs. It sounds to me like they're pulling this out of, I forget what it is, where not everybody can be I don't know, maybe not, but they're twisting. Let's see, I think it's Ephesians 4, and maybe just also John 5. I have to look, John 15. We'll have to look that up. But they're twisting something into making it fit this whole members of the mystical body. They like to do that, like the Trinity, this mystical third part of God that they like to. They say that it can't be seen, you can't understand it, but it's there. Just trust us. But one more quick thing while I'm on here is we're going back to a lot of stuff. Goes back to Halloween traditions. Go back to the Celtic society. Where did they get it from? And if you go back far enough, it appears that it goes clear back to Baal worship, which all this stuff pretty much originates from the worship of Baal.
That's right.
And child sacrifice. Derived directly from Baal rituals. Let's see. It says on November 1st was Samhain, Halloween. Fires were built as a thanksgiving to Baal. And it's quoted out of a book called Book of Holloween. And let's see, here's another one. It says mystic rites and ceremonies which Halloween was originally observed had their origin among the Druids. Ancient Baal festivals from which many of the Halloween customs are derived, and that was in a book called the American Book of Days. And you go on and about all these quoting of books, but it all points back to the origin of this is all Baal worship. Same thing with Christmas and Easter and all that. And it all goes back to that point.
You know, we might go to 1 Corinthians 10:21. I realize he's discussing, Paul's actually from chapter 6 through to chapter 10, Paul is on and off discussing meat sacrificed to idols and brethren going into idols' temples and eating meat, and some brethren being seduced back into the dark side of paganism. And then he says on chapter 10, verse 21, you cannot drink the cup of the Lord, and he means the New Testament Passover service, and the cup of devils. You cannot be partakers of the Lord's table and table of devils. And what he's really saying is many of these pagan customs, while in the context Paul says there is only one true God, and that the idols are nothing. While all that's true, behind much of the pagan paraphernalia are demonic spirits influencing large groups of people. And he's saying, don't get involved in all this riotous pagan stuff. You'll be messing around with demons. And while I grant you most people on Halloween don't go that far, but some people probably get deep into Wiccan and all that sort of thing. And I think they do start messing around with demons.
I think so too. If you approach the table of demons, pretty soon it's going to have that effect upon you.
It's like marijuana is a what do they call that? Not an introductory, but it's a drug that gets you started towards the harder stuff. You start hanging around and seeking out death and evil things just to get a kick out of it. It leads to further things down the line that can get you in much more trouble than just dressing up like Batman,
It's going to jump up and bite you.
Yeah, it sure could. Because I know, I don't know. It's just, it's not a road you need to start down. Granted, most people don't go that far, but plenty do. And a lot more now. I never heard the word Wiccan in my life till about 10 years, 15 years ago. Never heard it. There's a lot of words I'm learning lately that I've never heard in my life that seem to be popular nowadays.
Well, I lived in Southern California 30 years ago, and up in the mountains, up in a little town called Julian, I think, you would see the witches' circles up on the sides of the mountains at night when you drive through there, and they would be up there doing whatever they do, making their fires, dancing, or whatever it is they do.
But
So
California, they're always ahead of the game.
yeah, that was
Yeah,
30
they
years.
set the trends.
So that was 30 years ago. Now it's everywhere.
I would say if you watch TV and movies, you would come to the firm conclusion that Bible thumpers are bad and bigoted, and witches and Wiccans are enlightened and wonderful people.
Yeah, they love the planet, and they don't consider themselves they consider themselves good witches or good white, what do they call it, white, I don't know, they've got a name for what they think and the problem is a lot of these people get into this stuff, they think they can control it. They start playing with this satanic world, they think they can control it, and that they can somehow command or control this realm and these demons, and they learn the hard way they can't do that.
Wicca is dangerous. Our one man told me the story that he got into fortune tellers and he had to pay them certain money each time. And at first it was positive, but after a little while it got more dark and negative and scary. But he was afraid to quit going and quit paying them because if you don't pay me, something horrible is going to happen to you. And he said just dealing with fortune tellers and mediums, he said it was scary and depressing. It got worse and worse.
I had a fellow a couple months ago tell me that his ex-wife had left him for his brother, and they both practiced Santeria.
Ooh.
Yeah. And he's from the islands. And then he also told me that he also has trances and speaks in tongues, sometimes up to 8 hours.
Wow.
Yeah. But it's a good thing.
Mm.
You know,
Okay.
they say that the very best lies, the most effective lies, are the ones that have a little bit of truth in them, because it tends to make them seem legitimate. It's the same thing with a lot of this, and the way people embrace it, Wicca and this and that. They might do a little bit of good here and there to give it a legitimacy, but overall, it's the same old thing. It's a lie.
Yep.
It's pagan. You know, the pagans worship, at least many of them, nature. You know, they worship animals and trees, and isn't a lot of Wicca and similar things worshiping animals and trees?
Yep.
And Book of Romans speaks about that very clearly, to avoid those people and not to have anything to do with them. Yes. To go to Romans 1:21, I believe it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
But find that. So, one. Of course, not have to be able to see it. Hey, it isn't easy, man.
Just squint. That always.
I am squinting. For although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God nor gave thanks to him, but their thinking became futile, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools. They exchanged the glory of the immortal God for the images made to look like mortal man and birds and animals and reptiles. Therefore, God gave them over to sinful desires of their hearts and to sexual impurity for the degrading of their bodies with one another. Another place, another translation says, gave them over to a debased mind.
Now, I believe worship of the dead or worship of ancestors is where a lot of pagans are into that, and you can see how they subtly got mainstream Christianity and Halloween sucked in down the same avenue, same hole.
Well, Satan's a salesman. You know, it's not by chance he picked red and green for Christmas. Those are big sales colors. My signage that I have at my place is red and green. People see that.
That's so true. And by the way, in case some of the kids are watching with their parents, I'm not against candy, and I'm not even against costumes if you want to dress up to be Superman. But don't do it on the night of the pagans worshiping the dead and the devil's people are doing their thing. And by the way, around here, you know, there were a couple of years they were having parents take their candy to the hospital to have it X-rayed. You know, all the razor blades and stuff. And after a while, people started to realize, wait a minute, it's costing us more money than the stupid candy is worth.
Yeah, that started when I was a kid, not the well, yeah, they were the rumors. I don't know if it ever was true or not, but the razor blades and the apples and all that sort of stuff. So
Yeah, they would have all the kids go down to the fire station, and they would go over the candy with a metal detector.
Yeah, someone here a few years back was putting some kind of hallucinogenic in the candy, so the children would take that and start hallucinating, and it was terrible.
Obviously, if you want candy, talk to your parents. Maybe during the feast they could give you a whole bunch of pies or candy.
no, the best thing, candy. Candy is great. The November 1st, it's half off, man.
Yeah, the day after.
That's the best time.
Price. They November 1st and 2nd, get it for half price. All you want, right? By the way, we had a great contest at the
If you
feast.
can hold out to even get it at 75% off.
Yeah, hold out the third day, get 75.
That's what we used to do where I worked.
You see,
Well, it's. Do we have anything else you want to cover?
our carnal minds are turned back to candy. What else is there?
If you don't get your computer fixed, you won't have to shave next week.
Yeah. That's right. We have to do something about this computer. I don't know why that. Anyway.
We'll see what we can do. But is there anything else you want to cover?
I guess not.
Okay. All right. Didn't know. Well, I just want to thank everybody. I'm really I met a lot of new people this year. I really meeting with them at the feast, and I'm sure all the gentlemen here also probably met some new people. I know I did, and I had a great time. And just thank everybody that I did meet that was there for helping make that feast, one of my best feasts, and my whole family enjoyed it. So it was a great time, and if you ever get a chance, you'll never want to miss another one. And next week, let's see, I turned my lights off. We'll be here after, but it'll be after 9 o'clock. But different time zones it may be going on, but we'll see you later. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.